Hello and welcome to FLW TV. This is the EFL Transfer Round-up. My name is Sam Rourke, the Chief Editor of footballleaguewide.co.uk. I am joined by George Harbey, Ned Holmes and Ben Wignall this week. We're going to be chatting about all the latest done deals, all the latest transfer rumours and gossip across the EFL. Right, let's get straight into it, guys. We're going to talk about some of the latest done deals in the Sky Bet Championship. We're going to talk about Ian Poveda, his move to Blackburn Rovers on a season-long loan deal from Leeds United. Now, Poveda's not really played much for the Whites since joining from Manchester City. 20 appearances he's made for Leeds, but he joins up with Tony Mowbray's Blackburn for the season. And let's get your views on it. Ned, let's come straight to you here on this one. Ian Poveda for Blackburn, good signing?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly needed something. You know, obviously losing Armstrong and Elliott, that they've lost probably their best two attacking players last season. And I saw them at Millwall, and they got a 1-1 draw there, but I think they had one shot on target, and they look to really be lacking a bit of oomph up top, and hopefully Poveda can be the creative spark. He's obviously pretty untested, but maybe a run in a team and a fresh start somewhere is just what he needs.
I mean, obviously, coming up through the Manchester City Academy, he must have something about him. Like you say, we haven't seen too much of him at Leeds United. But Ben, I'll come to you. I mean, do you think Blackburn is a good platform for him to show what he's all about? Because we saw what happened with Harbey Elliott, didn't we? Last season, we've seen Taylor Harwood-Bellis as well really progress at Ewood Park. Do you think that this could be a really good platform for Poveda to kick on now?
Absolutely, yeah. He's a very similar player to Harbey Elliott. They're both left-footed. The strongest positions are both on the right-hand side. And Poveda, obviously, we've not seen a lot of him. But obviously, he played 14 times, I think, in the Premier League for Leeds. So Bielsa probably rates him to some capacity. I know he's dropped down the pecking order a little bit, but going back down to the Championship, he should make an impact. He's perhaps a little bit similar to Tyrese Dolan for Blackburn in the sense that they're both like very small, creative, flair players. But at the minute, I think they've got Sam Gallagher on the right-hand side, and obviously he offers something a little bit different in the sense that he's a target man. But Poveda can come in, he can have that impact that Elliott made last season. He might not start all the time, and he might not start straight away. He might need to get used to how Mowbray plays. But I can definitely see him making an impact over the season. And he's a player that will probably get Blackburn fans on the edge of the seats.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Victor Rourke come out after the deal was confirmed, kind of saying that how impressed he has been with Blackburn, especially the development of Harbey Elliott last season. And that played a big part in his decision to offload Poveda to Blackburn until the end of the season. George, we'll come to you. I mean, just how big of a boost do you think this is for Blackburn, for Rourke to come out and say something like this, that, this certainly does seem to stand him in good stead for future Premier League youngsters coming over to Ewood Park, doesn't it?
I mean, they've had success with the likes of Elliott before, Harwood-Bellis as well. So, Mowbray's got a good reputation of doing that. I think he'll give a lift to the current players there. Brereton, Diaz has started the season brilliantly, but he gives, I think, is a different player to Brereton, and I think give a good proverbial kick up the backside.
Absolutely. Let's move over to another transfer rumour or done deal. Sorry. So, staying on the topic of ex-Manchester City Academy players, Morgan Rogers has joined AFC Bournemouth on loan from City. The player spent last season on loan at Lincoln City, scoring 6 goals and providing 4 assists in what was a really standout campaign for Rogers at Lincoln. Let's come to you, George. Now, obviously, the Brennan Johnson-Morgan Rogers link-up we saw last season at Lincoln. Do you see Rogers taking that step up into the Championship with ease? Have you seen enough from him to suggest that he's a player that could really adapt to the second tier?
I think one thing I like about Rogers, is the fact he can play in number positions. I think last season in Appleton, for such a young player of his age, he's a strong lad, strong runner. He can play on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, through the middle. So I think it's a good move for him. I think, I'm glad he went to a good Championship team rather than sit in the City Academy every week, because I think that was the next step for him. I think after selling Danjuma it shows that I think it's £9 million future fee obligation. So it shows how much, Bournemouth have put faith in Rodgers and how much of a long-term potential they can see there. And I'm just glad that they've not gone for the proven established route to replace Danjuma, rather than they've gone for a young up-and-coming player who's still developing. I think last season at Lincoln, it was something like 6 goals, 4 assists in 28 games. And yeah, as you said, I think Forest fans are gutted that Rodgers didn't go to Forest because there was links with him there. But, in a free-flowing system like Bournemouth, where they play a good attacking football, I think on either side, or if you want to play in the Marcondes role behind the striker, he offers a lot of versatility, and I think he's a very good player, and it's a very shrewd signing for the Cherries.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the free-flowing nature of Bournemouth's play. I mean, you look at Morgan Rodgers, he can be utilised in various attacking roles, on the right, centrally, or on the left. Do you think, Ned, the fact that this kind of system is in place at Bournemouth, it will suit Rodgers down to a T, and almost give him more opportunities to start, given he can play in a variety of positions?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think you just got to look at how strongly that front three started as well. Anthony, his inclusion from the start might have surprised a lot of people, but he's been excellent, really. And the ability that Rodgers has to sort of play in that forward line or further back in midfield is clearly going to give him more of a chance, really. And you sort of get the idea Parker's, going to really sort of try and back him, get a lot of confidence behind him, and sort of let him loose in that Bournemouth side, and it could have, massive consequences for them.
Let's move over to another done deal in the Championship. James Garner has joined Nottingham Forest on a season-long loan deal from Manchester United. He did, of course, spend some time at the City ground last term. Really, really influential figure for the Reds last term. Certainly saw an upturn in their form when he arrived. Naturally, George, we're going to come to you. You watch Nottingham Forest as a reporter of Football League World most weeks. Just how big is this for Forest?
It's a massive boost at the minute, considering everything that's negativity around the club. I think you can outline a number of problems with Forest this season, but the midfield of Yates and Colback is just far too slow, not progressive enough, and they've got good attacking players in that final third, but they just don't move the ball pass through the lines quick enough. So the addition of Garner, who I'm surprised he come back to the Championship, because last season his performances in the second half of last season at Forest were just superb, and it's a massive statement of intent, because you look at people like Stoke and Sheffield United who are interested, and obviously Stoke have started the season really well and they played good football under O'Neill. So for Houghton to get him in, it shows how highly he respects. I was speaking to him yesterday, how highly he respects Houghton, how he just loves playing with these players as well. So it's a massive boost, and it should hopefully, from a Forest fans' perspective, get them attacking players and get more of a rhythm midfield, because they've just been so slow and turgid in the middle of the part of this season so far.
Yeah, I mean, is he a player that goes straight into that starting 11, no questions asked? Is he that good, do you feel?
Yeah, he is. He definitely. There'll be uproar if he doesn't. As I said, Yates and Colback, they're two good players, solid for this level, but they're too much of a muchness. They're two defensive midfielders who break up play, but they just haven't got a killer pass in them. So I think it'll be probably Colback who drops out. I think Yates is viewed quite highly by Chris Houghton. He's been captain this season in the absence of Grabban and Worrell. So he'll walk straight in, set to be involved against Wolves tonight in the Cup. So all about building match fitness for the forthcoming fixtures, really.
Let's move over to another done deal at Stoke City. Stoke have confirmed the signing of Romain Sawyers from West Brom on loan for the season. Seemingly not part of Valérien Ismaël's plans at the Hawthorns. He's now joined up with Michael O'Neill and Stoke City. Ben, we'll come to you on this one. What do you make of this from a Stoke perspective? He does, of course, have promotion experience with West Brom. Do you think this is a good signing for the Potters?
I think it's a really good signing, yeah. They have a lot of depth now in that area, Stoke. Obviously, you expect Nick Powell to be starting in that attacking midfield role, given how many goals he brings to the team. But behind him, you've got Sawyers now to add to Mario Vrancic, who's got promotion experience as well. Then you've got Joe Allen and Sam Clucas. So, and I think apart from maybe at wing back where they look a little bit weak, perhaps they've got a lot of depth all over the pitch. For Sawyers, obviously, he probably didn't quite cut it in the Premier League. He did start a few early games in the season, but when Sam Allardyce came in, he tended to favour other players. But I think in the Championship, especially when West Brom went up a couple of seasons ago, he was a class act. And ever since he's been at Walsall as well in League One, when he linked up with Tom Bradshaw, he was a very good player back then when I was watching him against Preston. Then obviously went on to Brentford and West Brom. He's done really well in the Championship, so I can see him being a very good signing and a very influential player in that midfield.
Yeah, I mean, Ned, what sort of qualities do you think Romain Sawyers will bring to this Stoke team? He for me, he's capable both in an attacking sense and a defensive sense. And when it comes to his passing range as well, he's certainly got that in his locker as well. I mean, what do you think he'll bring to Stoke?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, he's clearly a very technical player. We saw him particularly at Brentford really just pull the strings from that midfield area. I think he's excellent at sort of receiving the ball and looking to launch attacks and really play that killer pass. I'd hope in that sort of three-man midfield, he might have the sort of freedoms slightly to sort of get a bit further forward than he was playing at sort of West Brom, and we might see that sort of goal and assist return that we saw at Brentford that wasn't there at West Brom, though he was really effective in the sort of deeper role he was playing.
Certainly looks like a good signing for the Potters, you have to say. Let's move over to our last done deal we're going to discuss. Gary Cahill has joined AFC Bournemouth on a free transfer. He was, of course, last at Crystal Palace and was played a fairly pivotal role for them over the last few seasons. But he departed the South London club this summer and has linked up with the Cherries. Now, Bournemouth, it's fair to say, have started with a pretty youthful-looking back line. We've seen the likes of Zamora and Rossi start among that defence, Chris Mepham and Lloyd Kelly. It's a very, very youthful-looking back line, but bringing in someone like Gary Cahill certainly will add an element of experience, it's fair to say. Ned, again, we'll come to you here. Good signing for Bournemouth, this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at it as a great signing, really. I think it's easy to say 35 now, he's at the twilight of his career, but as you said, I think it was 20 Premier League appearances last year. This is a guy of hundreds of Premier League appearances, international experience. And when you look at the back line, it's got the likes of Kelly and Mepham as really the experienced heads at the moment. And so bringing in a player like Cahill, I'd expect to see him in there pretty regularly, but what he can do off the field, really, in the dressing room for that really sort of young back line could be massive this season.
Yeah, do you echo Ned's thoughts there, George, in terms of Cahill's arrival? Do you see him as someone who's going to embed himself into that back line and really become a leader for the Cherries?
Yeah, I mean, I watched them at Forest last week, and they had a big lack of squad depth. At the back, to be fair, they performed brilliantly. Rossi, Zamora, Mepham. But I just think, as Ned said, bringing in someone who's played in the World Cup for England, he's won a Champions League with Chelsea. It's everything you want to learn off as a young player. I know it's probably a lot of wages for 1 year, but at the end of the day, his experience behind the dressing room will be will be invaluable. And if that helps Bournemouth get over the line back to the Premier League, then there's going to be no complaints about paying him a decent amount of money for 1 year. So no, really good signing, still can play, really good, and he should be a real big leader at the back.
Right, well, that concludes our look at some of the main done deals in the EFL over the last few days. We're now going to touch on some of the latest EFL transfer news and gossip. Arguably, one of the biggest transfer lines to emerge from over the last few days is the news that Wolves are keen on Cardiff City striker Kiefer Moore. They are reportedly lining up a £7 million bid for the Bluebirds frontman, who, of course, was such a key player for Mick McCarthy's side last season, scoring a hatful of goals and also continuing that form into the Euros with Wales. Ned, we'll come to you on this one. Obviously, one of the standout strikers in the second tier, is fair to say. Do you think this interest was inevitable, given we've only got, a week left of the window?
Well, I'm not sure if maybe inevitable. I mean, he really proved his quality last season. I mean, in 20 goals, and it wasn't just the amount of goals he scored. I think it was the way he scored them, the way he dominated defensive lines, and he is the sort of player that maybe he's not quite proven himself to be that he's ready to be a Premier League starter week in, week out. But he's certainly someone that could come off the bench and sort of cause a lot of disruption and really change the avenue of attack and change a game, really. So I guess in that sense, it's not a huge surprise that Premier League clubs at this point might be thinking, what can we add to our squad to really sort of change things up if needed? And I guess more sort of fits the bill there.
In terms of, say this deal does go through, Kiefer Moore departs Cardiff City in the next week. Ben, do you see Cardiff being able to cope with the loss of such a key player? Have they got strikers in there that you feel will be more than capable of filling his boots?
Well, they've obviously brought in James Collins from Luton this summer, but he's not the same kind of player as Moore. Obviously, when you've got Moore in the team, obviously Mick McCarthy's team quite direct with crosses and long balls. Collins isn't really that kind of striker. He's more of a poacher in the box. So they definitely have to replace him. But I think Cardiff will try and hold strong. Obviously, he might want to move to the Premier League, but he seems like the kind of player who will be happy to stay at Cardiff and be loyal to him. But he's such an effective player at Championship level. Could he step up to the Premier League? I don't see why not. I wouldn't have pinpointed Wolves as a team that would particularly need him. Obviously, they've only really got Jimenez and Silva up front, both very different strikers, and perhaps Jimenez is in the mould to more where he can do a bit of everything, hold it up. He's got a little bit of pace, but I could see more at someone like a Burnley or a Newcastle, but Wolves would be a bit of a strange fit, I think. I don't think they'll end up meeting the asking price of what Cardiff will end up wanting. And I can see him staying around for at least another half season, see what he does. And if he scores, say he's in double figures by January, I think that transfer interest will no doubt increase.
Yeah, I mean, you could even say that Cardiff don't really need any strikers at the moment, given Aidan Flint's fine form in front of goal and Sean Morrison as well on the score sheet of late for Cardiff. So, yeah, definitely one to watch Kiefer Moore's situation at the Cardiff City Stadium over the next few days. Right, let's move over to our next transfer rumour. Preston North End are taking a look at former Premier League striker Connor Wickham. He's currently on trial at the Deepdale club. Now, Ben, we're going to come straight to you. You are a Preston fan, and you have quite strong thoughts on this one, don't you?
Yeah, well, there's no beating around the bush. We do need a striker. As evidence on Saturday against Peterborough, we had 6 shots on target and a lot of them went straight to the keeper's legs. We've scored 3 goals this season, 1 from a centre-back, 1 from a penalty. And I think ever since Jordan Hugill left in January 2018 to West Ham, we've not really replaced him as a striker who could do a lot. He could hold the ball up, he could shift a bit. And I think it's well known we don't really spend decent transfer fees. I think Emile Reese costs about $1 million, Whiteman 1.5. But apart from that, we do tend to Ched Evans was a free transfer as well in January. So Wickham, he definitely has technical ability. We've seen it in the Premier League earlier in his career. But the fact is he's had a lot of injuries in his career. He had a bad knee injury in around 2016 when he was at Palace. He didn't play a single minute last season. He played 2 under-23 games. And surprisingly, there's been a bit of a split reaction. Some PNE fans want a striker who can score desperately no matter what his past has been. Obviously, I think he played 15 times for Sheffield Wednesday in the 2019-20 season and scored 2 goals. It's not someone I want us to be looking at. I would rather us take a punt on a younger Premier League striker on loan perhaps, or someone like a Dion Charles from Accrington. He's from Preston, but he'd obviously cost a decent transfer for Accrington. Don't want to sell him. As Frankie McAvoy said, there's no harm taking a look at Wickham, but if we're pinning our hopes on him and if we do sign him, then I think obviously we've already had Izzy Brown in this season, signing to a 1-year deal, and with his injury history, he broke down very quickly with an Achilles injury, and he won't be seen till the back end, if not next season. So it's not one I'd want us to be pursuing, but if he impresses in training, I'm happy to give him a chance, and hopefully if he does sign, we can keep him fit and he can score a few goals.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems to be a transfer that is dividing Preston fans right down the middle for sure. Right, let's move over to our next one. Nottingham Forest, Reading and Barnsley are among the clubs keeping tabs on Sheffield United left-back Max Lowe. He's seemingly not part of Slavisa Jukanovic's plans at Bramall Lane. He's hardly really featured for the Blades ever since his move from Derby County, but the aforementioned trio are keeping tabs on the defender in a potential loan deal. George, we'll come to you first. Now, we learned exclusively at Football League World last night that that Nottingham Forest had an offer knocked back for Max Lowe. Do you just want to explain a little bit more about that piece of news and the potential signing of Lowe for Forest? What it would be? Would it be a good move and stuff like that?
Well, I think first and foremost, Forest are desperate for left back. This summer they've allowed Blackett, Ribeiro, Ianu all to leave the football club, and yet they've told a player in Gaetan Bong he can leave at the start of the summer, but he is now pretty much their first choice left back. They brought in a right back from Arsenal in Jordi Osei-Tutu, who's now out for several weeks with hamstring injury. He was having to fill in left back. So Forest are absolutely desperate for a left back. Chris Hughton has made no secret of that. And as we said, we understand one of the targets is Max Lowe. Now we also understand that Forest's first loan offer has been rejected. For what reason that is, we are unknown. But I suppose that it can be anything from wage percentage pay and option to buy and loan fees, and obviously Sheffield United with a trio of clubs after him are obviously going to want what's best for them. I think Lowe will be a decent sign. I rated him at Derby. He's found it tough to break into the Sheffield United team. Obviously, Ben Osborne's being used there as a wing back. Reece Norrington-Davies has come back from Luton and done well. And obviously, Ender Stevens are injured. So it remains to be seen at this stage whether Forest will reignite interest. They've got many targets at left back, and he's one of them. But they're going to have to bring someone in fast. And it looks as if Reading and Barnsley are also quite keen. And I think it'll come down to really whoever wants to pay most of his wages, or one of them may want to pay a loan fee up front. But Forest desperate for a left back and Max Lowe on their radar.
In terms of Max Lowe at Sheffield United, Ned, are you a little bit surprised that he perhaps hasn't kicked on as much as he did? I suppose you could put Lowe in the same bracket as Jayden Bogle, another ex-Derby County player, kind of a lot of hype around him, and performed very well in the Championship with Derby. Did you expect him perhaps to kick on a little bit more than he has done at Bramall Lane?
I think with Lowe, it's sometimes easy to forget that he's still only 24 now, and he didn't have a huge amount of football under his belt. I think he had a loan somewhere, and he sort of fought his way into that Derby team the season before he left. But for me, he joined, and then Sheffield United have had a bit of a difficult period, and I guess that has played into partly why he's not really been able to establish himself in that side. I do think a move away, a fresh start is probably going to be the best thing for him, and I'd be excited to see him at somewhere like Forest that really, just as George is saying, that they need a left back so badly that he could be the man to come in, and if the fans get behind him, that confidence boost could be massive for him.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, he's a player very much in need of a fresh start somewhere new this season. Right, let's move on to our next transfer rumour. We're sticking with the theme of Sheffield United. Their young striker, Dan Jebbison, is attracting interest from a host of top-flight clubs. Everton are the team that appear to be at the front of the queue for the player. They've already had a £5 million offer rebuffed by the Blades for this striker, but there's a handful of other teams from the top flight also keeping tabs on the player. He broke onto the scene last season, ironically, at Everton. He scored at Goodison Park and in what was a pretty impressive performance from the young 18-year-old up front. But, Sheffield United right now are blessed with an array of strikers. His immediate pathway into that starting 11 is pretty blocked, it's fair to say. So a move away is certainly not out of the question. Ned, we'll come to you first. What do you think of the whole Dan Jebbison situation with Sheffield United? Is he a player that they should really be looking to keep hold of? Or if the price is right, would you be inclined to sell?
I think really that the first stance needs to be sort of look to keep hold of him. I'm not convinced you know, he's the player they should be looking to sell if they're looking to sell a striker. There are a couple of others, you know, Moussa, for example, that I think they should be looking to shift on. He's obviously a player with huge potential. We saw that in sort of glimpses last season. And it's the kind of move that, you know, I think it was 5 million that Everton bid for him. You know, that's not exactly a huge amount of money, and that's the sort of money that you sell a player like Jebbison for 5 million, and a few years later you're left kicking yourself when suddenly Everton have got this fantastic talent on their hands. So if I were them, I'd certainly be looking to hold off for the minute. But you know, I think it's 2 years left on his contract now. So if a really significant bid comes in, then they'll obviously have to listen to it.
From Dan Jebbison's perspective, Ben, would you be tempted by the lure of a club like Everton? Or do you think for your personal development, maybe it's better to stay at Sheffield United and bide your time and try break into 11? I mean, where do you think your head would be right now?
Obviously, it's tempting. Obviously, Everton are a big club in the Premier League, and then you've obviously got to look at, like Ned said, there's a lot of strikers at Sheffield United right now. But if I was Slavisa Jokanovic, I would be looking to get rid of like a Moussa or Ollie McBurney. Didn't really pull up any trees last year, but obviously these players are on quite big wages, so it could be hard to get rid of them. But I think tonight could be, when they play Derby, it could be a big, if he gets a chance, it could be a big chance for him to show what he's made of. Obviously, we've not seen a lot of him. A few months before he had his Premier League debut, he was on loan at Chorley in the National League North, getting a little bit of experience. So he's kind of just come out of nowhere, really. And that goal against Everton was a good example of what he can bring, a kind of poacher's finish. He's got pace, and that's something that only really, obviously Moussa and Bruce as well could bring that kind of pace. But if it's a tough one, if Jokanovic can get rid of one or two of those strikers before the deadline, I'd be inclined to keep him and give him a bigger role, say coming off the bench to start with, see how he does. If he does go to Everton, he's more than likely just going to go into the under-23s where they've got another young striker like Ellis Sims who played well at Blackpool last season, and he'd probably be competing with him. So if I was Jebbison, I'd be looking to stay at Sheffield United for now, see what the bigger picture is in January, and go from there.
Yeah, certainly a few interesting days ahead for Dan Jebbison and this transfer saga. Right, we've got one more piece of transfer news to bring you. This is a Football League One exclusive. We understand that Leicester and Southampton are keeping tabs on Middlesbrough right-back Jed Spencer. Spencer's been heavily involved in Neil Warnock's side so far this campaign. Only 21. He's had a really, really enjoyable few seasons at the Riverside and is attracting plenty of suitors in the top flight. And Leicester and Southampton, we understand, are two of the latest clubs keeping tabs on the player. George, we'll come to you on this one. Now, Spence has had a good few seasons at Middlesbrough. Certainly a very athletic fullback, likes to get forward, a sort of defender that you feel a lot of top flight teams would like to have in their team. What do you make of this from a Middlesbrough perspective? Is he a player that you feel they need to be keeping hold of? Or, you know, if like with Jebbison, if a deal comes in that's right financially, do you think they should accept it?
Well, he's got 2 years left in his deal, so it's one of them ones where they're not in any desperate rush to sell him straight away. You know, they can get another good season out of him and review it in next summer. You know, he burst into the sea under Woodgate and did really well, I remember. And last season didn't get as many starts as what he wanted. I think it was 20 out of 41 in the Championship, so didn't get too much get regular game time on the pitch. But as you said, he started this season well. I think Borough will be wanting to keep hold of him. I think Warnock does rate him overall. You know, the clubs are interested. I don't think he's quite ready for Leicester yet, especially when you consider they've got, you know, Ricardo Pereira is, for me, one of the best right backs in the Prem, and James Justin, who can play on either side. Southampton's an interesting one because that is it Livramento who's just gone to Southampton. He's, you know, started off really well, but maybe someone up and coming and homegrown like Spence could, an British like Spence could really push him along. So I think the decision to time down to a new deal, I think it was last year or last season's looking like a masterstroke now because, you know, they're in a strong position, Borough, in this one.
Just finally on this, Ned, is Jed Spence someone you feel that could adapt to the rigours and demands of Premier League football?
I think maybe it's a little too early for him. You know, there's clearly like a lot to like about him as a right back, but you know, I'm not sure that he showed, and I'm not sure he was convincing enough in the Championship last season to prove to me that he'd be ready for the Premier League. Now, as George says, you know, both Leicester and Southampton seem to have some pretty good options right now. So, I mean, I would be thinking if I were either of them, I'd be sort of buying him and sort of loaning him back, maybe to Borough, maybe to somewhere else.
Right, well, that concludes this week's episode of the EFL Transfer Roundup. We really hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to us on YouTube at FLW TV. All the new subscribers and follows, it's very much appreciated. But please stay tuned to FLW TV, because later at 2 o'clock, we've got the Yorkshire EFL Roundup hosted by Alfie Burns. So please do keep tabs across the socials for that show just a little bit later on. But once again, thank you for joining us.